and welcome to a special edition of Newsmakers, as it is an anniversary, 70 years in the making. And this Friday, June 7th, is the big day. All this week on the show, we are celebrating 7 decades of broadcasting. Yesterday, we talked about some of the biggest shows to air on CHCH over the years. And today, we get a little more personal. We sat down with some of your and our favorite employees from yesteryear. We call them our legacy employees because they are our legacy. The 70th anniversary segment producer, Don Jonescu, reached out to Connie Smith, Dan McLean, Alex Reynolds, Fred Anderton, as you see right there, Bob Cowan, and Paul Hendrick for a series of chats about their time at CHCH and so much more. And on today's show, very pleased once again to be joined by Don Jonescu. And Don, just looking at some of that archival footage, I mean, some of them haven't aged a day. Most of them haven't aged a day, I should say.
No, it's pretty amazing. They're still extremely recognizable. I know that for some, they're not.
Let's break this down. All week, we're talking about the 70th. Yesterday, we talked about some of the shows that made CHCH what it is. Today, we're calling them our legacy employees.
Yeah, it was a name I came up with just because I never wanted to call them our old or former employees, because one thing that really came to my attention was, despite how they may have left CHCH, despite everything, they still considered it home. And it was important for us in this new building to connect with them and make sure that they feel a connection to us and the building.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned, I mean, we talked about this yesterday. Did we get everyone we'd hoped would come back? No. Some people politely declined the invitations, and that's fine. But it was really great to see Dan and Connie back on the desk. And speaking of Dan, let's start with Dan McLean, senior news anchor at CHCH for almost 30 years, 1980 through 2008. It wasn't easy to get him here.
It really wasn't, and it honestly shows the level of commitment that we had, not just me, but everyone. Our news director, Greg O'Brien, and I were noodling on how to make this happen, and Greg said, I got a crazy plan, and it meant that Greg had to stay up at his place up in the Tobermory area, and he was going to come home on the Wednesday. And on his way, he detoured to Owen Sound, not quite the easy detour you would think. He picked Dan up, brought him here. He came in. Man, people were excited to see him. It was something. So he came, he spent the night in a downtown Hamilton hotel, and we worked all day, and then I drove him back. And boy, I actually wish we'd had a camera or a mic on that trip, because it was amazing. Sure didn't seem like 3 hours.
And again, this is the effort that you and Greg and kind of the whole 70th anniversary team went in, because it was that important to make sure that he was here to get to celebrate it.
Yeah, I don't think you can properly celebrate a 70th anniversary without a Dan McLean or a Connie Smith or an Alex Reynolds. And again, as you said, there are people who said no, and I feel that there is a gap because of that. But again, I hope that they see and hear about this, know that people want to see and hear from them, and they change their minds.
Dan, you mentioned it. Basically spent the whole day. We've seen the media panels on the 6 p.m. if you've been watching. That's been a great discussion. And this whole thing was really about bridging the past and the present, right? And getting to celebrate, what we've done, of course, but where we're going. You mentioned Danny had a great time that day, and he really seemed at home. And he talked about being at home. And here's what he had to say about that.
In reality, I was part of the fight for so many years to get the Jackson Street studio built, and we followed that along with great interest. And then, of course, it's now gone, so I can't believe it's gone in that short a time. But it hasn't been that short a time when you think about it. And this is my first opportunity to see the news station. I love it. I think it's a great place. They got some very, very good work stations and healthy places to be. And it's a very clean building. I think it's a terrific spot, ideal for a television station. And guess what? That's what CHCH is.
Well, before the clip, you mentioned home. And, you know, this is a guy who spent a lot of years here, had his good days, had bad days, but was visibly moved walking into this building for the first time. And watching that made me feel good that I and we are part of this story that is now extending into our second 70 years.
And we talked about it, you know, we've had different studio spaces. Of course, this is the brand new one we've been at for a little over 2 years now up at Innovation Drive. And it's a new building.
Absolutely.
Letters are the same, though. And here's Dan on what he had to say about that new building.
Don't know if it started with us, but it sort of felt like it sometimes. Between us, we might do up to 100, 150 different jobs a week or a month, whatever. And the telethon was a classic example of how a television station can play a very integral role in helping the community develop. It was the same with the Cancer Center. And I was very involved with the Cancer Center and the fundraising of it as a co-chair. But the telethon is the biggie. I think we raised like 36 million over the
17 odd years.
17 years, yeah.
Yes.
But it was an event that
Brought everyone together.
Yeah, and it took every single thing you had out of you. I mean, when we were done with that show, we could probably sleep for a week.
And that is Dan there talking about the community of CHCH. And that's kind of what we were talking about, that it doesn't matter what building you're in. You know, this is a community. We celebrate the community, whether we're in downtown Hamilton, whether we're up here in Dundas. You know, the point of what we do here is to serve the community.
Yeah, that's the through line through all of this. You know, Dan, Connie, Brian, and the Bridger, or as I call them, the Bridgertons, and, you know, Annette Hom and Bubba, they recognize how important the community is. And even our current staff have come quickly to understand that it is really a symbiotic relationship between CHCH and the community, and it's one to be treasured. Not every station or newspaper or radio has that connection. Man,
yeah.
Something.
Well, and I see it every day, you know, going out like in Niagara too, right? The amount of people who come up to me in Niagara and, you know, thank you for doing Niagara stories. You know, you're the only one I watch because you're the only one who come out here to cover stories and things like that. And, you know, that's true for other communities. Milton, you know, we're a big part of that. Of course, Hamilton, Burlington, Halton, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I've always felt that. And as somebody who grew up in the community, to be able to be on air here and to get to do this, I find really special. And hearing, you know, even Dan for 30 years was exactly how he felt. So I thought it was pretty special.
Yeah, and, you know, you can take a little pride, or we all can, in the work that we do, whether it's raising money for Juravinsky, like he did, or the telethon, or when we do things together like McHappy Day. Things like that. They're important. And I think, again, we all know and recognize that, and we're grateful that people are so invested.
We have another clip here from Dan. You want to set this one up?
Yeah, so one of the aspects of the media panel was to discuss how things have changed over the years. And we'll hear from Dan about that, where he tells us about his typical day.
All right, let's listen in.
Back when I started, it was telephones and typewriters and little else. We were all jammed in a house. The whole newsroom was a house. Connie was there as well as me a little later on. But yeah, there was the film editing was done there, and it was film, not video. And we had a couple of strange characters who did that for us, but it was a remarkable process. And then we'd stack it all together in a big pile, and the director at the time would carry it over to the old house, which is where our studio was, which was a matchbox with 3 cameras in it and way too many lights. And then everybody would jam all of that stuff together with the film chains and the slide chains and all the other stuff, chains of any sort. And there you have it. You had a newscast.
It really is pretty incredible to hear them, and even, you know, I was putting together that intro at the top of the show, going through you know, archived footage here, And what a different time. Like, even he said off the top, it was typewriters and telephones, and that was it.
Well, he also went on to talk about how they would actually physically carry pieces of paper to the...
I got paper.
Yeah, but the wind would whip up. And occasionally you would see, you know, somebody chasing them down the street. And I can't picture it, you know, even though 30 years ago when I started in this business, we got one computer with the internet. One. I don't know how they did it.
For better or for worse, I mean, the internet has helped us. It's made it easier to obviously access information. You know, you don't need to go, call people up. You can really just Google search, when did this happen and how did this happen type thing. And it's obviously a huge part. It's got its drawbacks too, though, every once in a while.
Yeah, sure. Especially if you read the comments.
Don't read the comments. Don't read the comments. Well, that was great to hear from Dan. Obviously, great to see him. Looks like he could still anchor, by the way he was sitting on that desk.
You never lose that voice.
Somebody else who looks like she could still anchor is Connie Smith, and she was part of our celebration. Of course, the first female news anchor at CHCH, and what a job she did.
She is really an icon. You know, the first female anchor here, but also instrumental in bringing the newer people along, not just here at CHCH, but she also taught for a bit. And it's so important for people to share that. And she is always, always so keen. And again, it was just wonderful to see how emotional she got, even when she's reflecting on the makeup of the newsroom, which is a lot different than it is now.
Let's take a look at what Connie had to say about seeing everyone again.
It was very overwhelming. I hadn't seen Dan in a few years. Well, we talk every few months or so. And in a way, it was like coming back to work again, seeing some familiar faces and being so embraced by so many new faces.
No, I will admit I am one of those new faces. I had seen Connie Smith, of course, at events throughout town, having worked in Hamilton for the past 10 years. But, you know, I've only been here 2 years. I'm learning all this history as we go, but it really was just a welcoming, hey, how are you? The double handshake, the intense eye contact, right? Like she's really interested and just a very genuine soul.
Very, very genuine soul. And she also remembers the importance. And maybe it's changed and grown a little bit because of the internet and things like that. But she genuinely feels happy to see CHCH in good hands.
Speaking of CHCH being in good hands, of course, if you look around the newsroom now, you see a ton of fantastic women, both behind the scenes and in front of the cameras, who do a great job. Was a little different in Connie's time.
Yeah, it sure was. And she tells us about it, and she makes it relatable. And you watch old movies and old TV shows, and you see not a lot of women. And but to hear it firsthand, it's different.
Yeah, here's what Connie had to say about being one of 2 women in the newsroom.
There were 2 women, myself, Joanne Garcia, and it was all men on camera,
Was
all
Kathy
men.
not there then?
Nope, Kathy Renwald
she came a little
started
later, yeah.
several years after me.
Yeah.
She was the first female to ever go into a sports locker room. Like, she made history as a sports reporter. But no, it was, a very different time. And it was myself, Joanne Garcia, Susan Prestige was on air at CHCH before me, and I thought, oh wow, will I ever get on air like her? There were the Betty Kennedys of the world,
yes.
Barbara Frums, and I interviewed Betty Kennedy when I was a Good News reporter way back on CFRB, but they were very few bright beacon lights for women back then. That was it. And so I was very fortunate to land the job at CHCH when I did.
I mentioned this earlier, like the amount of women who work here now, it's pretty incredible to, again, look back on these archival footages and see 1 or 2 women. That's not the way it is for much better these days.
Oh, for sure. I think we actually have, to use a baseball analogy, a murderer's row of talent, and it includes so many women. And I'm going to name them, and I know I'm going to miss one. Maria Saru, and Annette Hom, and Nicole Martin, and Emily Taylor, and Emily Vukovic, and Manisa Donabalan. And that's not even the people who are behind the scenes.
Laura Sabin, Katie Zawadzki,
Tansy
Coe,
Chantel Grillo,
Laura Sabin, Laura Brody, excuse me. I've already said it. Dolores.
Dolores.
But yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great staff that we have here for sure.
Yeah, and yeah, it's just great to be with people from different backgrounds.
Now, when you're with someone like Connie, it's impossible not to ask for advice. It's impossible. Everything she's been through, it's possible not that. She had some pretty good advice to give.
Yeah, she really did. She's the type of person you want to connect with, a teacher and a mentor. And it's so important because you learn things in the classroom, and that's the X's and O's, but you don't get the subtlety of it. So
Now, here's what Connie had to say when it comes to advice.
What I would say to young reporters or students who are studying journalism is find a way to move the narrative forward. Everyone gets a news release, everyone finds out what's going on. Who is doing something to make it better? And it's all about this whole approach to being positive, and sometimes people say, oh, you know, you can't always be positive, but you can find someone who's moving the narrative forward to make a situation better. And if you focus on that, I think, the next chapter, you're doing two things. You're following the story closely and moving it forward, but you're almost controlling the narrative to shift the focus, the mindset of people to say at home, oh wow, so it is hopeful. Something positive is happening here.
And she talked about, you know, getting the start on the good news on CFRB, always a beacon of joy and positivity. And you can see it right there with Connie Smith and what she brings to that on-camera presence, and just some great advice for aspiring broadcaster or for anybody.
Absolutely. And sometimes we overlook the importance of good news. And, you know, I hate to say something nice about Tim Bolin, but that is one of the good things that he has brought to Morning Live with his feel-good
good things
time.
he's brought to Morning Live, okay? Well, I'll defend my friend Tim Bolin here. I know you're just joshing, but of course, feel-good time, a great way to start the morning.
Absolutely.
And, absolutely. Now, talking about standing on the shoulders of people who have come before us, somebody who I've always admired here, who got their start at CHCH, Paul Hendrick.
Yeah, Paul Hendrick, boy, he was one, like Dan, I never thought we'd have a chance to talk to. But he was so interested and so keen, and his story is so fascinating. And again, Louie, all these interviews in their entirety are going to be posted online in the next week or so on chch.com. And I encourage everyone to go listen. Some of these went 20, 30, 40 minutes. The media panel went almost 2 hours. But it's really, really, really good. And he's another one. And he said when he came in, he felt so disconnected from CHCH. He left on his own. He went to work he was on Lease on 11. Then he went and did some more work for a certain channel for a certain hockey team that I don't like to mention. But he always was grateful and knew the importance of CHCH here. And he tells a really, really good story.
Yeah, you asked him, you went way into the Wayback Machine to find out how he got to CHCH. Here's what Paul Hendrick had to say about that.
December 5th, 1981, and I'd spent 2 years, 3 months up in Sault Ste. Marie at CKCY Television and Radio, and this was an opportunity to get into the big time. Dick Beddoes had hired me, and I was nervous beyond nervous. My mom, I swear, was at Dundas Square in Toronto handing out leaflets saying her son was going to be on Channel 11 that Saturday at 6 o'clock, and please watch. And I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but she told a lot of people, and I said, please hold off. Just hold off for a week while I get a weekend under my belt.
That one kind of like sticks with me a lot for a couple of reasons. Obviously, I started as a weekend sports guy, and That again 2 years ago last week, and my first day, and I haven't told this story, but my first day, my grandfather passed away on my very first day here. So I know that it meant a lot to my family to be able to turn on the TV that day and see me, and on a day that was so down for a lot of us. We had that little kind of sparkle of my career starting, and he mentioned his mom there, and I know my mom and my grandma are big fans of what I do, and if my mom tells me she'll run into somebody at the Sobeys in Fawn Hill and, oh, but they saw you on TV. There's not a day goes by where I can't go to my mom and say, or go to my hometown and hear my mom say, oh, I ran into somebody who said they watch you on CHCH, which kind of brings it all back to this community aspect of it.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, even behind the scenes, I would, when I was writing for a different network, I would call my mom and say, hey, watch this. And when you hear this word, I put it in for you. And oh my goodness, you'd think I'd given her $1 million.
I think the moms always love they're like pseudo celebrities too, right?
Sure.
Like they take a lot of pride in a lot of people, and that's why online I tell her not to read everything, because some of my biggest fans are online, and some of my biggest haters are online. So mom, take it with a grain of salt.
Anonymity is awesome, my friend.
Now, despite his long career, Henny still remembers what it was like to be part of his very first broadcast. Here's what he had to say about that.
The first newscast went so well, comfortable. Norm Marshall was as welcoming as can be. He and his wife Helen were at my wife and my wedding several years later. He was family, and it was just an incredible thing to finish that broadcast, and not 30 seconds after the broadcast to have a phone call in the control room from Dan McLean welcoming me to the family. And that feeling of family has never left. I've been gone since September of 1998, and even when we get together with the old gang, it's family, brothers, sisters, their children. We all like to keep up to date with what's going on, but the sense of family that came out of working at CHCH television has never left me.
Yeah, talking about his first broadcast there again. I mentioned it was an emotional day for me on my very first day. I didn't tell anybody when I got here, but then I did my little sports thing behind the desk, and then I looked at Shelly and I looked at Nicole, and I explained to them what had happened that day, and they both came like running over and hugged me and stuff. And so that's of course a memory that'll always stick with me. Just like every time your first time on TV, it's something that's always going to be really special.
Yeah, it really is. My first time on TV was doing a dance at TSN. We did the Macarena. Thankfully, that tape no longer exists.
Was that
but you never forget it.
Sports Center?
We were
Jay and Dan gig? Or,
well, we were the wacky desk back then.
the wacky desk. We have one more from Henny, right?
Yeah, we do. And again, this is the community through line, and why it's important, and not just for news, not just for entertainment, but also for sports.
And it's the importance of doing what the big sports broadcasters, which you kind of mentioned, what they can't or even won't do. Here's what he had to say about that.
This is our backyard. And I always thought, let's go strong local. Fred Anderton, I worked with Ken Welch. We were all on the same page in that regard. And whether it have been Tiger Cats or any of the various local teams, McMaster Sports, Mohawk College, it was important that we promote that. We loved high school sports, and that included Burlington Nelson and the Tharby brothers and Stefan Potasic, and then, of course, Cathedral High School, Mark Walton, those great basketball teams, and, the OFSA championship in 1984, and just all that this area had to offer. People tuned in to get that.
People tuned in to get that. People tuned in to see themselves on TV. People tuned in to hear their names, the team they cheer for. I always made an effort, whether it was junior B hockey, junior C lacrosse, people love that stuff. Fort Erie Racetrack just last week was something that we got a lot of praise for. It's a little 30-second story. Hey, the Fort Erie Racetrack opened, but again, people want to hear their own stories on TV.
Yeah, they really do. And again, not trying to be too nice to everybody, but you. Bubba, Brianne, when she was here, and I'm sure the new weekend sports person, whoever that might be, will continue that legacy. And I know that Henny mentioned he appreciated that because he was always worried that as the station evolved and grew, that the local angle would be forgotten or overlooked.
Next voice we're going to hear from, somebody who had a huge reaction when he came back, and that's Alex Reynolds. He spent 26 years as our feature entertainment reporter and was a viewer favorite.
Man, I can't tell you the number of emails and messages online that we get. How's Alex? Is Alex okay? And we were really excited to bring him in. And yeah, he was treated like a king. Everyone, even the people who weren't entirely sure what his place was at CHCH, quickly found out, and he was swarmed.
Yeah, everybody wanted to talk to him.
Everybody wanted to be.
We had not just one pizza party, but two pizza parties.
That's right.
When it came to Alex. And as part of our panel, Alex shared his first time on CHCH and his appreciation for Connie.
My angel, because the first on-air, on-camera situation for me was when the announcement was made that I was joining to do entertainment. And I had no concept, I had no interest in television because I had a radio background, which I enjoyed. And so I had no idea what to do. She interviewed me on them, was it Noon and 6?
The News at Noon,
Yeah.
I think, that went on at 6.
And making the announcement. And I was petrified because I knew nothing about television. And that's how it started. And she calmed me down, and I've always regarded Connie as my angel in that regard.
That's so
But
amazing.
once I got into, I had the learning process,
Yes.
which you do automatically because you learn and instinctively, but then the people you work with, they teach you automatically. It's a kind of do it while you're shooting, and the interest is risen, and then you learn that way, and gradually that's the way it was. And to this day, I'm still a little very nervous in front of a camera.
It's all about teamwork. You mentioned it there, and it's all about supporting each other. And I've obviously done this with some of our coworkers. You know, I think of Emily Vukovic coming on here, Tim Bolin, and even Simone, like somebody a little more new in the business. We've all have the same belief that we're a team here. We're such a small team. We go through things together, which is a lot different than these big market newsrooms that we compete with sort of day to day.
Yeah, I mean, it really is a together everyone achieves more team. And it's trite, but it's true. But Alex was so genuinely moved and excited to be here, but he keeps talking about how he misses the camaraderie and the teamwork. And I made a promise to him that he will always be part of that, and we'll get him. Next up, we have a clip from Morning Live with Tim Bolin. Tim and Alex have a great relationship. They tease each other all the time, and there was some stuff that wasn't suitable for airing, but still absolutely hysterical and very respectful. But there was a moment of sincerity from Alex.
All right, let's take a look.
It's great to be home.
Goodness.
You know, mixing again with you guys, and it just warms up my heart because I love that whole era that we did.
Again, it comes down to loving who you work with, being a team, wanting to see others succeed, and it's great to know that even back in Alex's time when he was the guy, that's still how it felt. And it's something that, despite the era of who's working here, it's something that we all just kind of walk in the door with.
Yeah, and he was again genuinely moved by the reception that he got, and he loved meeting the people, and he cannot wait for Friday when I think he's going to come in at about 8:15 in the morning and stay until 7:30 at night. But he's a great raconteur. He's got great stories, including encounters with celebrities. People know about his relationship with Harry Belafonte. They were friends, close friends. but he also tells a story about Harrison Ford that is amazing.
Let's take a look.
Harrison Ford exploded at me during an interview when he was here promoting the remake of
Raiders?
something that Audrey Hepburn was in,
Goes back
years ago.
before that. Ooh.
And he got mad. I said, I did not think that this film was all that great simply because I didn't think the writing was up to par with the original. I'll have you know, he says, I come to work all knowing. I said, that's not what, I'm not criticizing you. I said, I thought the scripting was weak. I saw him again 2 years later, and he apologized.
Now, could you imagine, like, if Indiana Jones, Han Solo, apologized to you 2 years later? Not just right away, not just an outburst and like, oh, I'm sorry about that, but like remembering 2 years later this Hamilton entertainment reporter and getting an apology from Harrison Ford.
It's amazing, and it speaks to how well Alex did his job. He was always prepared. I should mention the movie in question was Sabrina with Julia Ormond, and it was during his trying to be more sensitive phase. Harrison's, not Alex.
All right, that brings us to our final legacy member. Who is it?
Well, since you asked, it's Fred Anderton, who, despite everyone else's popularity, his You Ask segments, we still, again, get emails and messages. Bring it back. Let's do more. And he sat down with Annette on Morning Live to talk about it.
And added a key element to the segment.
Yeah. Again, it's the women behind the scenes that make it right for everyone.
Let's take a look.
Mary, my wife, as you know, had some really good ideas. Somebody would call in with a question, and she said, well, why don't you put their name on the TV? People love that, so we did that.
Viewer engagement.
Exactly. And then the other thing that we did, she said, why don't you get people at the end to say, you asked. So I would say, this is Fred Anderton, and I'm glad. And they would say, you asked. So we go to like a high school football game, and we get 50 kids in the stands, and they would all yell, you asked. And now they go home, and they tell their parents, hey, I'm going to be on CHCH tonight. And so that worked out really, really well. So I have to give credit. Mike Catrice really liked that. He was a news director at the time.
Yeah.
But I don't think I ever told him it was Mary's idea. I think I took credit for that. But now he knows.
Now everybody knows.
So many secrets coming out during these interviews, some behind-the-scenes look. Safe to say, though, You Asked, one of the most popular segments we've ever done here at CHCH.
Like, it's amazing. They are up on YouTube, so if you want to see them. A few years back, CHCH did sort of a holiday edition where they brought back some of the old ones, but it also, it goes back to what you said. People want to see themselves on TV. There's no better connection than saying, hey, what about that ship in Jordan Harbor? Or what about that building? Or this or that? And again, that's part of the connection that we've achieved.
People want us to bring it back, obviously.
Absolutely.
Right? And I remember like Dwayne explaining it to me. Dwayne, one of our legendary camera people, kind of. It's just like people would just say, like, they'd drive by something and be like, hey, what's going on that hill over there? And then he'd go in and find out what's going on that hill.
Annette, too. Annette would always, and she actually says, even now, she drives around the city or Hamilton, Halton, Niagara, sees something, and she's like, oh, why or what or whatever. And then she thinks of Fred. So here we are, years and years and years removed from the segment, but it still resonates.
Now, we mentioned the media panel. We've seen bits and pieces of it. Obviously, it looks great. It was shot great. You mentioned it was over 2 hours. Now, is there a plan to see that entire 2-hour media panel?
Yeah. First of all, we're going to post it online. And then we are going to take a few days and boil it down to a 1-hour on-air segment. And The only edits will be for time. We're not going to change any of the stories. Frankly, we could do a 2 or 3-parter with all the good stuff. And yeah, again, it was an amazing team effort from Aaron McCormick, who set it up, Keith Johnson, who was shooting it, Chantel directing it, Mike Corsten, Dave Meidlo. I know I'm forgetting everybody, but everybody was on board quickly and wanted to make it work.
We mentioned Dwayne. Dwayne was on the panel. Chantel was on the panel as well. But yeah, a lot of work getting that show to air, and it will make it to air. Like you said, the only edits will be for time. You're going to be back tomorrow.
Sure am. And tomorrow we're going to talk to our current team and the Bridgers.
Me?
Well, we'll see, Louie.
Oh, okay.
This is your audition. So
Okay,
we'll
cool.
talk about it after.
All right.
But yeah, we're going to hear from the current employees and the Bridger employees, and we're going to hear some of their stories and things like that. Nicole Martin has an especially personal story that she's going to say, you're in for a treat. How's that for a tease?
I like that. I like that. Well, thanks for doing this today. I know it's a lot of work putting these clips together, so I appreciate it. So thank you, Don.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Don will be back tomorrow as we celebrate 70 years here all week here on CHCH, on Newsmakers on CHCH. Thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank Laura Brody for directing today's episode, Katie for running the prompter. You're the best, Katie. Thank you. And thank you once again for listening, because we really do appreciate it. Make sure you like and subscribe to CHCH Podcast so you never miss an episode of this show or any of the other great shows we have for you from all of us here at CHCH. I'm Louie Butko. Have a great day.